AI is without a doubt a future of the world. It has the ability to write detailed reports about anything you could think of. It has the capability to create art from a single sentence. And you can also convince Peter Griffin that he could be a drag model. Maybe the last one won't help us too much in the future, but you get my point. So what do I do with that power, you may ask yourself? Well, I use ChatGPT to help me with a playthrough of Monster Hunter World. I got this idea from another YouTuber by the name of Gungear. They are linked in the description below. They made a very good video about the same concept, however they used Dark Souls, and Dark Souls really isn't my favorite game, so I decided I'd try the same format but with Monster Hunter World. For the people who aren't aware, Monster Hunter World is a game about hunting monsters. Well, there's a little more to it as well. You can climb walls, shoot monsters, kill monsters, capture monsters, love monsters, kill monsters again, make monsters in armor, turn monsters into badass weapons, fall, ride a dragon, kill that same dragon by setting him down a giant waterfall. And there's so much more. Before I get into the video, I need to preface by saying, Monster Hunter World is honestly one of my favorite video games of all time, and I absolutely love the journey that ChatGPT brought me on. So please hit that like and subscribe if you would like to see some more of this type of content. Without further ado, let's get into it. First things first, we need to start by laying down some rules. Rule number 1. AI must pick all weapon choices, switching at only 3 points throughout the game. Rule number 2. AI must also select all gear sets I will have to use throughout the game, also switching at 3 points throughout the game. Rule number 3. I can repeat optional quests in order to gain armor sets and gear for my character. And rule number 4. My consumables and loadout will be dictated by the use of ChatGPT. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we can finally play the game. I started with the character creator and created my devious, manly, brawly hunter, Aurelia, with his furry little friend Whiskerbeard. And with that, I woke up on the back of a giant moving rock in the middle of the ocean with the handler. After reluctantly following her directions, I found out that this giant moving rock was actually, yep, you guessed it, a giant monster. Who saw that one coming? After leaping off its head and falling into a forest, the handler and I found ourselves at a little camp in the ancient forest. At this point, we had to find our way back to the research base so I could finally start the game and kill some monsters. But I had to wait for all the fun stuff so the handler could look at flowers and tell me all about the cool, lame monsters. While the handler was aimlessly walking around, we encountered a pack of jaggers, and I was hoping that they would maul the handler, but unfortunately the handler smelled so bad that they all left. After continuing, we finally found the roadblock to the commission base, but it was blocked. Until the great Jagras showed up, and a guy with a huge sword ran the Jagras into the blockade to let us through. From there, I ran for my life to the gate, then the giant T-Rex jumped down and ate the big lizard monster, and now that I think about it, the devs were definitely on something when they came up with this game. Nonetheless, I finally made my way back into the base and began my journey as a certified monster hunter. I needed to ask ChatGPT a very important question here as well. I needed to know what my weapon of choice throughout the beginning of the playthrough will be. And he, she, they, I don't know, it's 2023. I'm just gonna come up with my own pronoun for ChatGPT. As a matter of fact, how about I just ask the bot itself? Huh. Okay then. The AI helped me pick out my weapon of choice, and it's going to be the Charge Blade. Yes. The Charge Blade is one of the more complex weapons in Monster Hunter, with the files and making sure it doesn't exhaust and constantly making sure you capitalize on any damage you can. It's a very busy weapon to say the least. Once you understand the Charge Blade, it actually becomes very simple. It has 5 files, and those files turn different colors based on the attacks you do with the sword and shield mode. When they turn yellow, they fill 3 files, and when they turn red, they fill all 5 files. Once all the files are filled, you can charge your shield, and then you can charge your sword, and then once all the prep work is finished, you can unleash the big boy mighty strike on your enemies, dealing massive damage. If it doesn't move, that is. That's the gist of the Charge Blade. Got it? Good. Moving on. I then checked out the canteen where the handler was stationed, stuffing her face as usual, and accepted my first quest. My first task was to get rid of some of the jaggers that the handler and I encountered during her wandering around the ancient forest. The field team leader led me to the same area that we saw the jaggers earlier, except this time I was armed and dangerous. Equipped with my Charge Blade, these little vermins didn't stand a chance against me whatsoever. I made very quick work of them. After harvesting their corpses while their brothers and sisters watched, I was sent back to the commission. Before I left for my next quest, I had to ask the AI some questions regarding what weapon upgrades I will be able to use throughout the first leg of low rank. The first weapon that it gave me was the Bone Strong Arm 1, as it offers good raw damage, but other than that, there's really nothing to write home about. Nonetheless, it was still a solid first weapon. As I mentioned earlier as well, I will change my weapon type and armor sets 3 times throughout low rank, stopping at certain points in the story to make those changes. When those points come, I will be sure to let you know. But for now, we have to get used to using the Charge Blade for the time being. For those that don't know, Monster Hunter World's quests are broken up into 3 different ranks of quest: low rank, high rank, and master rank. I won't get too much into the other 2 right now, but that'll be for the future. Like and some people want to see that. Anyway, after crafting my new Charge Blade, I was then tasked with an assignment to thin the herd of some Kestodon that Zorah Magdaros sent here from his wake of entering into the new world. Just to clarify, Zorah Magdaros is the big, giant volcano island monster. Anyway, after following the same steps as the last quest, I found some Kestodon and killed their family for absolutely no reason. As they really weren't bothering me at all, I just wanted some cool new gloves. However, as I was trying to kill them, my attacks kept bouncing off their thick skulls, which in turn just made me angry and only heightened my lust for blood. While I was harvesting some Kestodon corpses, I was dragged into a cutscene, and the Great Jaggers has made his return. And this time, it was me versus him. But to be completely honest, fighting the Great Jaggers was like LeBron James playing basketball against a morbidly obese person. Every time the Great Jaggers tried to move off or get an attack off, he would end up falling over and flailing his arms sporadically. After a few minutes of non-stop bashing, I finally had hunted my first real monster. Finally, we can start the fun stuff. I harvested the Great Jaggers for some materials and continued on my journey deeper into the forest with the handler and the field team leader. There, we encountered a feathery poison bird, the Puke, and a giant volcanic rock left by Zorah. After returning back to the base, I was then sent on an expedition into the ancient forest to find a new area for a camp to set up. After a little wandering and harvesting, I found the location for a new camp. However, it was a little occupied when I got there. The Kulu-Yaku was going to be a threat, had we decided to set our camp up there. And it just so happened that I was the only one capable of taking down such a nasty, gnarly, and devilish monster, and so I did. And quite frankly, I think if PETA saw this, I would be behind bars, because goddamn did this guy get absolutely obliterated. I returned back to the commission, and the commander had a few words to share with me, stating how he was happy, and I did something, or I don't really know, I didn't pay attention to be honest, but we have a new camp now. At this point, it was due time I paid the smithy a visit, and finally crafted myself some much needed armor. I prompted ChatGPT to give me some armor sets that I would be able to use for the first leg of low rank. The AI gave me 4 sets that were available for me to use at this current point in the game: the Bone Armor set, the Kulu-Yaku armor set, the Jaggers armor set, and one more set I'll save for later. So I crafted what I was able to, which was a bone chestplate, bone gloves, and a Kulu helmet, and I was ready for anything now. Next, I was tasked with hunting the Puke, the big giant poison bird, making sure to eat a nice meal before the fight as I wanted to get some temporary buffs to my stats. After rearranging my loadout, it was time to fight. Puke was definitely a little more challenging than the first 2 monsters I encountered, but not by much. He was still no match for Aurelia and Whiskerbeard. Even the Great Jaggers joined into the fun at one point to even further the decimation of the Puke. During the fight, the Puke used its tail a lot to get some attacks on me, so I decided to sever the tail straight off the monster so it wasn't able to use it anymore. After around 10 or so minutes, the Puke was injured and flew back to its home. I then located it and murdered it in cold blood, while it was just trying to have a nice meal. I then harvested the carcass of the Puke and continued my journey along the story. And great. The best kind of quest is my next mission. Ooh, what fun. I then dropped into the desert wasteland that the commission refers to as the Wildspire Waste, ready to take on the most engaging quest in the entire game.
Yes, the Wildspire Waste features a mixture of dry land and swamps.
Oh my god! Wow!
During the quest, however, the scientists for whatever reason just kept talking about my schlong. I mean, like, it's flattering, guys, but come on now, we're in a professional environment.
Yes, it certainly seems to exceed the measurements in all the guild's writings.
I wonder, how many years does it take for a beast like this to grow to such an enormous size?
Moving on, during our escort of the completely empty cart, we stumbled upon a Baroth. This muddy beast would give me a more difficult hunt than I expected. I also unfortunately had my first cart of the playthrough, thanks to Diablos. But he was no match for me afterwards, with me and Cactuar being the ones to finish the job and send Baroth to the grave.
You did it, partner! Okay, I'll be waiting over by the flag.
After the quest was completed, a new face was introduced to me. He was a hunter from the First Fleet. I suppose he didn't want to share any names, but he is referred to as the Seeker. After bonding over some drinks, he and I went our separate ways, and I continued my journey as the only hunter to ever pull their weight within the commission. I returned back to the home base, and I was informed that there was a missing scholar among their ranks. I was tasked with finding him within the Wildspire Waste. After locating the scholar by a deceased Baroth, I noticed that the Baroth was covered in sharp thorns, and the scholar seemed to be very shocked at the sight of something. There was no time to waste, however, as the Giratotus made itself known, and its name was next on my long list of monsters that needed to be dealt with. The environment of the sticky mud and the deep water made it a little more difficult to fight against the Giratotus, but it was all worth it in the end, as I made him into a fool and very meticulously hit the take the L on his corpse and took his bodily remains. Returning back to the camp, I had a quick conversation with the chief botanist. He told me that in order for the Tree of Life to be restored to its full power or whatever, I needed to hunt the Tobi-Kadachi, but I was definitely in need of some serious upgrades if I wanted to stand a chance against Tobi-Kadachi. To get these upgrades, it would definitely take some elbow grease, but I was ready to put in the work, and so I set off on an expedition to do just that. I found some small flying monsters called Murnos to get some wingdrake hide, and also slayed some jaggers for their sharp claws. With that behind me, I was finally able to craft some Kulu-Yaku pants and a Jagger's belt. Now that my armor was sorted out for low rank, it was time to take on Tobi-Kadachi. Initially, I was a little worried about heading into the hunt, as Tobi was quite an elusive monster at times. But with my wits kept about me, I headed into the hunt with my head held high. Arriving back into the ancient forest, everything seemed quiet. Too quiet. So quiet, in fact, that you could hear me eating a nice 3-course meal with your mother. Soon after, my scout flies picked up on the trail of Tobi and eventually led me right to the monster. I was quickly bombarded with a barrage of attacks which really threw me off, and it ultimately led to me fainting. This unfortunately confirmed my suspicions. I was never going to be the monster hunter professional like I'd hoped to be. But I'm no quitter. So with my wits about me, I trudged back into the fray with my weapon drawn and revenge tattooed on my my forehead, and I came back with an undying vengeance. I was able to read Tobi-Kadachi's every single move and telegraph my moves accordingly. He stood no chance against the animal abuse that I was in the act of committing. With a jail sentence brewing in my near future, I raised my axe one final time and struck it down on Tobi-Kadachi's head with such might that he became lobotomized completely and remained functionless. After my act of cruelty ended, I made sure to carve the Kadachi as much as I could to get all the materials I could carry. I returned back to the commission and I was finally ready for a new upgrade of my charge blade. The bone strong arm served me well, but it was finally time for something that packed a little more of a punch, that being the pulsar strong arm. This charge blade upgrade offers great damage and a decent amount of affinity. For those who don't know, affinity is the ability to break parts on the monster, so the higher the number percentage, the better. Now that my weapons and armor were sorted as the best they could be for the time being, it was time for my next quest. But I needed to address my loadout before leaving. As stated earlier, I am only able to use loadouts that ChatGPT made available to me, and here is a list of those things now. So far, I've gone into hunts, besides a few starting quests, with items that I am allowed to bring in. Moving forward, however, as hunts begin to gradually increase in difficulty, it's time for me to finally adhere to that rule. I also forgot to clarify that any resources or materials that I find while on the hunts or expeditions can be used within that hunt or expedition. I just can't bring items that ChatGPT didn't state into hunts. So now, with all that lame rule stuff out of the way, it was finally time to cross the game's first hurdle, Anjanath. For those who recall, that was the giant fire-breathing T-Rex monster that ate that giant lizard in the beginning of the game. Well, it's back now, and this time I'm his rival. I left the commission with a sense of angst, and I was ready for what awaited me, but I knew I needed to pull through if the base wanted to thrive, as the only other person capable of anything there was the fucking cat chef. Everybody else there can't even put their pants on the right way without assistance. Especially the handler. So with the entire commission relying on little old me, I was ready. My scout flies quickly picked up on the trail, and before I knew it, I was face to face with a fire-breathing T-Rex. Anjanath. This monster was definitely a little more intimidating when you were on his naughty list, but nonetheless I held my own, at least for a little bit. I managed to shoot some boulders down and bonk him on the head, dealing some good damage as well as wailing on his defenseless self for a few solid seconds. Afterwards I was chipping away at its toenails as much as I could, when eventually he got the better of me, to say the least. Feeling rejuvenated, I was ready to head back into the hunt. I tracked Anjanath down with ease and continued to knock around Anjanath, so much so I sent him flying off a cliff into a big pond. It still wasn't enough. No matter what I did, he just came back stronger and stronger each and every time. This eventually led to my second feint of the hunt. The Anjanath left me no choice but to put on the big boy pants. I had one more shot to seize everything I ever wanted in one moment. Would I capture it or let it slip? Of course I would capture it. In fact, I would go on to kill the damn thing too. After beating on it for a bit longer, it limped back to the rest area where it kept falling over some vines over and over again, which just allowed me to wail on its head and body until I finished it off with a final axe blow.
Attention towards capturing Zorah Magdaros.
It was done. The Anjanath was dealt with. I harvested some of the remains and returned back to base. Now I can finally reveal what the last armor set I can use in low rank is.
Oh, you're never gonna guess it. You're never gonna guess it. I bet you have no idea what it could be.
It's the Anjanath set. From my hunt, I only had enough materials to craft the Anjanath greaves, so I did. This was going to offer me a nice boost in my defense for my upcoming quests, as this next quest was regarded as the most engaging quest in the entire Monster Hunter franchise. It was time for the Siege of Zorah Magdaros. My excitement couldn't be contained. It was in fact not even close to being contained, as it took an all-inclusive vacation to Mexico and decided to depart from my body for 35 minutes it took me to finish this stupid fucking quest. Sorry, I just don't get how I go from fighting a giant, fire-breathing T-Rex for 20 minutes straight to running around back and forth cannon to cannon and occasionally to a ballista for 20 minutes, then going on the back of Zorah and breaking fire crystals that shoot lava. Sorry, I just hope I don't have to see that format of quest ever again. I'm sure I won't. Although my efforts were not in vain, I was now introduced to my arch-nemesis. He appeared in the sky as a little speck and grew in size with every inch it gained, landing on the back of Zorah Magdaros and letting out a roar. It was finally here. Nergigante. If you remember back to the Wildspire Waste, this monster was responsible for murdering that Baroth. And that Baroth may have had a family, I'm not really too sure. But in my mind, I like to think they did, so I'm fighting for at least some purpose and not just poaching innocent animals. And so I began wailing on Nerg relentlessly, quickly realizing that Nerg was a very, very strong monster, and I was a long way from fighting without my plot armor. With that knowledge, I latched onto the beast's face and shot some stones into his eye, which sent it flying directly into a wall. This was enough to trigger my plot armor cutscene and send Nerg flying away like a little baby. With our sights on Nerg, Zorah was unfortunately able to get away at that time, because nobody is capable of anything at the commission, besides yours truly. Although we let Zorah get away, all hope was not lost, because after a team meeting, the commander made it apparent that a new region has been opened by Zorah. To gain access to this new region, I first had to explore the Great Ravine, so I walked for a solid minute before I stumbled upon the gorgeous landscapes of the Coral Highlands. Everything seemed all fine and dandy when all of a sudden a monster appeared in the sky, and the handler's dumbass was too blind to realize something was about to kill her, and before she realized, it was too late. I tried my best to save her, but the monster destroyed the ledge below us and we fell into a giant pit of nasty, rotten remains. While down in the pit, a mysterious stranger found us and brought us to safety. Waking up some time later, I found myself in an unfamiliar place. And no, I'm not talking about the back room, silly. I'm talking about the giant floating balloon pirate ship. After actually realizing that I was on the Flying Dutchman's pirate ship, I had to speak with the head elf in charge. And the game refers to her as Third Fleet Master, but let's be honest, that's lame as fuck. So instead, I'm gonna name her Girl Elf. So Girl Elf and I chatted it up for a little bit, and she informed me all about the Coral Highlands and now I was able to explore it and whatnot, to which I replied to maybe we could go out to dinner sometime because I know a great place. This cat cooks the meanest steak. And she said maybe. Nonetheless, with my new date on the horizon, I did exactly as she asked because that's the kind of simp I am. Exploring through the Coral Highlands is always so fascinating. It's truly a unique environment. Upon my trek, I stumbled into a I can never say this word. A Zizi-Yaku. This monster is extremely similar to the Kulu-Yaku, but instead of picking up a rock, it flashes you with its cool ears. So I hunted it. Pervert. I was also tasked by my girlfriend to go establish a new camp in the Coral Highlands. Doing that and then returning back to the air research base. I had another quick conversation with my girl and she informed me that there was another task before I could take her on a date. I had to deal with this inflatable monster, and this thing was the weirdest thing I've seen, period. The Paolumu was a flying rat cat. That's the best I can do in all honesty. But as these hunts increased in difficulty, I kinda got too big for my britches and forgot what armor I have against these much stronger monsters. So this fight was definitely a little more challenging than what I was expecting. Soon after pelting its head with an axe for about 15 minutes, it staggered back to its home, where I killed it by smacking it in the face with one final axe swing. I returned back to the balloon base and my girlfriend told me another thing I have to do, but it's all fair in love, I guess. It was time to journey into the rotten Vale. This was the underside of the Coral Highlands. So as beautiful as the Coral Highlands are, there's always a complete opposite down below. I was told to sight a great gyros, and while tracking the gyros down, I found some other monster tracks I decided to follow as well. My scout flies seemed to congregate around this pile of bones, so I checked it out. And before I knew it, the giant boner sorry. The giant bony monster made itself known. This roly-poly Radoban was annoying to fight, to say the least. The mobility it had made it very difficult to dodge at times, which eventually led to me biting the dust. I came back as I usually do though, with a newfound confidence to beat the absolute shit out of this monster. So I did, and I did it well. So well, in fact, that I had some time to mine the bones off his back, as I destroyed every other limb on it, including but not limited to his bony spikes, his tail, his face, and I'm sure somewhere else too. After dealing with the Radoban, the strange, mysterious stranger from earlier showed herself, and she told me that she was another hunter from the First Fleet, referred to as the Tracker. Anyway, after her lame speech, I moved on with my day. As we descended further in the Rotten Vale, there was some uninvited guests. Big ol' ice birds swarmed us. They were referred to as Legiana, and these little ice bitches were like the Anjanath of the sky. So of course, as games usually go, I had to go kill the giant ice bird thing before I could get to the good stuff. With my lover in mind, I set out to kill this ice bird getting in the way of our love. To say the least, this thing was actually kinda scary to fight. I ended up fainting twice very early into the fight. So I locked in, and I played some of the best Monster Hunter of my entire life.
Nice shot!
To the base of the Rotten Vale. Come on, let's head back to the research base.
After carving some of the rewards, I returned back to the research base, and it was finally time. And if you're thinking about my date, you'd be sorely mistaken because it's time to switch the weapons up. Oh yeah. So I asked ChatGPT and the AI replied back very quickly with my new weapon for low rank, and it was the longsword. This thing is just I was actually secretly hoping I would get this weapon, and I'm very happy I did, to say the least. If it wasn't time to fuck some shit up earlier, it's definitely time now to fuck some shit up. But I also had to ask ChatGPT one more question, and that's asking which longsword it wanted me to use. I also made sure to tell it what point in the game I was at by telling it the next monster on my list, but don't worry, I won't tell you that yet. And with my luck, as I received my answer, it was different from my last response. You see, last time when I got asked, I got 4 options, but now there was only one. And this one would be pretty difficult to get right now. The Rathalos longsword. Which in all honesty is a great thing, but I can't progress into the game until I obtain this weapon, and well, Rathalos is a monster that you fight towards the end of low rank, and I was just around the middle point, so I was a little confused as to how I was to go about this. As I didn't have access to the monster's quest specifically yet, there was no way to guarantee a hunt with Rathalos. Except there was. By going on an expedition in the ancient forest, I was able to find the Rathalos there occasionally, and when the Rathalos was there, I had to fight it. And needless to say, it took a pretty long time. And finally, after 3 hours of hunting the same monster over and over again, just to get one singular drop, I got it. And the Rathalos longsword was mine, and it was finally time to test drive this thing. So I took it to the ancient forest where I met a great Jagras, and I'll let the footage speak for itself. If you have no idea what just happened, let me explain briefly. The longsword is a much lighter weapon than the charge blade, making it easier to maneuver during a hunt. It also has a plethora of moves. By looking up in the top left of the screen, you can see a little red sword. The more basic attacks that I land with the longsword, the more the bar fills up. Once the bar is completely full, I can do a spirit combo which uses the spirit I gained. However, if I land the final hit on anything, it gives me an extra bar of spirit that I can use. And the tiers go as such. Silver is the first, gold is the second, and red is the third. What can you do with these tiers, you may ask yourself? Well, even if you already know, I'm still going to explain it anyway. Once enough spirit is gained, you can tap into your inner samurai and use 2 different moves. The Spirit Helmbreaker, or the II Slash. The Spirit Helmbreaker is just overall one of the coolest fucking moves in the game. Jumping off the monster to bring the sword down, dealing a load of damage is always satisfying when it lands. Whenever I'm in the air, I can feel myself hovering off my seat in temptation for the hit to land. And usually it doesn't, and I get blue balled the majority of the time. Furthermore, the II slash is probably one of the most anime moves in the entire game. Sheathing your sword and slicing the monster in one dash is just sick. So overall, the longsword is probably the coldest weapon in Monster Hunter. So now that we have the weapons sorted out, let's continue on. Now that Legiana had been dealt with, I could finally return to my girlfriend about that date. Unfortunately, she then told me to fuck off and go even deeper into the Rotten Vale, which is very dangerous territory. But I just saw that as a sign of trust. She's just playing hard to get. With my expectations higher than the moon, I set off on an expedition into the Rotten Vale. Upon arriving, I was told to find some more Zorah Magdaros footprints. Following a few led me to a giant pile of Zorah shit. But before I could get a mighty whiff of it, we were interrupted. And as per usual, the handler's stupid ass decided to split up when a giant monster was stalking us. I even tried to tell her, but she's got ADHD or something, man, goddamn. Anyway, as you probably guessed, she got jumped by Clifford the big red dog. And to be honest, I was just gonna let the motherfucker eat her. So I had to now hunt this Odogaron just because the handler wanted some get back. This was also the first time using the longsword in an actual hunt, so it was a little tricky. So tricky, in fact, it led to me failing my first quest.
Whoops, you failed the quest. That's okay. Get yourself prepped and try again.
After the terrible defeat, I gathered my thoughts and meditated for 12 hours straight, ready to join the fight again. Psych, I'm just playing. I just jumped right back into the intention to make this dog bleed. Setting back off on the hunt, it was finally time to really break in my new longsword. And this thing in action was amazing. It felt like a long-lost master regaining his old sword, but only if the master was blind in one eye and had trouble balancing himself sometimes. Countless combos later, the fight was still on, with the outcome teetering either way. The great Gyros decided he wanted some smoke, which he shortly regretted as the Odogaron whooped its sorry ass. I then realized there was an opening I could take and deal some serious damage. But I couldn't make my fingers work the way my brain wanted them to, so I ended up shooting next to the monster's head with my claw, and by the time I locked onto its head, it kicked me off and slapped me in midair. Odogaron 1, me 0. Rejoining the hunt with more determination than ever, I breezed through combos like butter. Everything clicked. I was in the flow state. Swinging my sword felt like walking. I then tracked it back to its home, woke it up from a nap, and shot my special sleepy pills into its eyes. I think he liked them. The handler then cried again when she saw the tracker because she's a baby bitch, and the tracker explained the ecosystem around the Rotten Vale and Coral Highlands. The cycle constantly repeats itself. I then found myself back at base speaking to the commander. He informed me that I need to speak with the first Wyverians as they are the natives of this land, although while trying to find one we ran into an old friend. But now it was time to officially hunt this bad boy, along with Diablos. These hunts were surprisingly tricky, but instead of narrating it, I'll let the music do the talking. After cleaning house with Rathalos and Diablos, it was time to face the big bad himself, Zorah Magdaros. This time it was either us or him, and there was nowhere for it to run off to. After a quick debrief, we set off. I was dropped straight onto Zorah's back and began the super engaging task of breaking magma crystals. After around 8 minutes, and unfortunately a feint, an old foe has returned once more to say his final goodbyes to Zorah. Nergigante had returned, and he also got me too. I wasn't having the best of days, okay? Nonetheless, after trying to re-engage in the fight, he just flew away, so I guess that's that. I then continued to break magma crystals until told otherwise. Then the new orders came to shoot at it with cannons for the final 10 minutes, which was super fun. I did get to use a pretty cool weapon though through the Dragonator, which ended up being the nail in the coffin for Zorah, driving it back out into the sea, and finishing our final hunt of low rank. Hey, it's me again, and I just want to say that if you're hearing this, thank you, because that means you watched all the way through this masterpiece of sorts. If you actually liked it, it would mean the world to me if you could like the video and maybe leave a comment on your favorite part or things I can improve on, and of course subscribe if you feel it's necessary. I would appreciate it. This was the first time I tried something like this, and it definitely took me a while, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And hey, who knows, maybe high rank is just around the corner.